All right, everything's working at once. All right. Hello, everybody. I'm Dr. Thunder, and this is Case Closed. Case Closed. And we have quite the show for you today. Case Closed, the return of Brittney Griner and Donald Trump is a valuable lesson. What can we learn about political power and influence from the recent return of Brittney Griner? Can we see parallels with the recent resurgence of Donald Trump, even though his legal troubles, he actually went up in the polls? What are the similarities and differences in their power base? How do black men build their constituency and power base? And remember, as I've been saying, black men are the new political X factor. So, how do we build our power base? What are the coalitions that can be formed from common interest? And what are the sacrifices? What are the sacrifices that need to be made? This and more today on Case Closed. Let's Warning. Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. What's happening?
What's up? What's up? What's up? What's up, ladies and gentlemen? 000, as I once heard you say. Dr. Thunder? Is it triple
That's
zero
right.
or is it? All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think that we're going to get right into it. Okay. As you come in, click that like button. It's case closed. We're going to be talking about some real politique, right? And that has to do with pragmatic means, pragmatic methods to get into perhaps an idealistic goal, right? And when it comes to the case of Brittney Griner identifying with certain groups politically, and then the influence that that garners helping her in her return and her re-assimilation, this is just part of what politics is. By definition, it's a thing governed by group social dynamics, right? It's about your group propping you up. Okay. So the question to be asked then, let's start with Kaizo. Can black men have play in this arena of group propping up? Or let me put it in this way to you. Are black men insufficiently Machiavellian? Just get us started there, Kaizo.
Yeah, so for my opinion, I think black men are not organized enough to be even part of that conversation yet. To be recognized as a group, as a Machiavelli group, you need to have certain group abilities, right? I give you an example, right? You got to be like the Chinese. You come together, you build Chinatown, and then you only employ Chinese people in your businesses. Black people, unfortunately, we're not there, especially black men, right? Look at the whole manosphere. We're always bringing women into the conversation when it's about leadership,
No, no,
as
you
if
brought women. I'm sorry.
we,
Go ahead. You just
we're
brought
not
women in,
supposed
but
to be
go ahead.
reasoning with women. We we bring up women as if they're equal to us, right? And that's the issue, right? Other races don't do that, right? So no, black men, individual black men, right? Like Kevin Samuels or Jay Z and all these people, they can be adequately Machiavelli, and that's why they're successful. But the average black man as a group, no, we're not even in the conversation.
Okay, so Dr. Thunder, right? So what would Booker T. Washington say about and there's a reason why I'm asking these questions here. I think it's a good backdrop. Again, realpolitik talking about power. Booker T. Washington, with regards to this group, status group, coalition forming, how do you build yourself up? If I recall, it will have to do with things such as industry. Um, and when I say education, I mean education as a means, actually knowing stuff and being in the places where you can actually create some expertise, and building up yourself that way and forming alliances accordingly. But if I'm making sense, Dr. Thunder, what would Booker T. Washington say about the question that I asked Kaiser there? Okay, how would he go about answering the question, or how do you go about having that group that will prop you up, like Brittney
Yeah,
Griner's group propped her up and Donald Trump and such?
yeah, I think Booker T uh, would be mostly concerned about individuals developing skills um, at a high level so that they could compete on the job and be good representatives of their race, as it were. And then from all of these individuals doing that, eventually um, you know, there is a a benefit um, to your race. There's a benefit to you. You're able to climb up, and then you can potentially make relationships with others that both respect you, um, have actually seen you up close working, right? And then potentially you can bring in more people that look like you. Du Bois, E.B. Du Bois, W.E.B. Du Bois would be much more about establishing sort of coalitions and more of a protest model. So, and more caucusing and more sort of strategic kind of things. Booker T's approach was less it was more simple. It was a more simple approach. You yourself do the work, develop that way. Other people will,
Okay, so what was
your
the
effort.
Tuskegee?
Yeah, go ahead.
And while you land here, and this is not a second question, it's just kind of like, okay, as we're landing, you're mentioning you created a divide, right? So, but the things such as there are ways to organize, right, in
Yeah.
the Booker T. Washington side of the aisle, and I'm sure that Booker T. Washington was aware of and probably promoted. And I would say that the Tuskegee Institute is a testament to that, right? In the sense of you build institutions as you move along, and you kind of uh, create these foundations and cement them as you go along. That is a way of organizing and such. It's just not as political as
Right.
because those in doing so, these organizations and these institutions, let's say, there are coalitions, right? But it's not what you would call overtly, let's say, political. But go ahead.
Yeah. So you're sort of creating relationships based on whatever the work is, not based on whatever, not based on necessarily what the societal issue is or what the civil rights, you know, um, whatever, atrocities, whatever stuff is happening that you want to see get changed, rather than sort of jumping on the front lines and protesting that. You're sort of working inside the system, the existing system, uh, to sort of make those changes. I would argue that both are valid approaches. However, timing and kind of knowing what the circumstance is critical. You know, um, both of those approaches are not going to be equally effective, um, given whatever the dynamic is, whatever the politic is, whatever the circumstances.
Very well answered. So LAR, with regards to Brittney Griner's group, would you say they did a good job in bringing her back in, or do you think there was anything particularly let's say if it was Will Smith, I'm sure Will Smith would probably get by too, or because of some other particular special favors that can be pulled because he's Will Smith or whatever. Do you think Brittney Griner has much pull, that much pull, or do you think if I don't know if you've if I'm being clear. Well, I know I'm not being clear. Sorry, right? But did Brittney Griner deserve? Did she have enough pull, enough sauce, enough celebrity to get the special treatment that people are saying she got? Or was this kind of like extra, and any other comments you want to make there?
Did she have enough pull? In an American sense, yes. Because she had more pull than Olympians that pulled at those type of stunts and got out of it. I wish she had just as much pull. But she had less pull than them. What was the swimmer that was acting a fool in Brazil and got a slap on the wrist? Was Ryan something. But is she famous enough? Yeah. As far as power, as far as group, I would say it's just like it's really a nothing burger sometimes, in my opinion, because
Okay.
I think with other groups, we make it more than what it is.
Mhm.
Because in all honesty, was that a win for her quote unquote community, or was that a win for what win was it ultimately? Actually, like her incident, maybe even being spoken up with Donald Trump's incidents right now, in my opinion, they're not even in the same stratosphere. Somebody did something stupid and got caught overseas with weed, and somebody's getting accused of doing all kinds of things in the White House. Like that's kind of like Richard Nixon versus Cheech and Chong. Like
You have shady friends. I'm sure you know they're all the same. It doesn't matter.
no, they're not all the same, because some of them are way worse than others. Like they got rap sheets. You know, petty theft and attempted murder is two different
Six
stratosphere
times.
of shady friends. You know, so yeah, that's it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. This is case closed. Get those liked buttons up and the share as well. So we're talking realpolitik again, Kaizo, and I'm gonna ask you to continue where Dr. Thunder perhaps left off here and bring in Mr. Donald Trump. Okay. Or let me just let's bring in some facts about Donald Trump, right? Okay, I think the facts about Brittney Griner are generally more known. We haven't said any particular facts about Donald Trump. There are several of them, including the fact that he completely destroyed in this particular CNN kind of town hall debate type thing. He came, he did his full thing of like one-liners. He was killing it. Everybody was laughing. Okay, yeah, good old Trump. He's back, right? So besides that, let's talk about the case that Mr. Eliar alluded to. Tell us a little bit of the facts about the case, because I believe
Yeah,
you're aware of it. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah. So it's interesting. So Trump has just been found guilty in a civil lawsuit, right? They tried to put this through the criminal court, but due to evidence lacking and other issues, they couldn't do it, right? So they went through a civil lawsuit, and the lady, right, Jean Carroll, she won, and Trump's got to pay $5 million in damages, right, for sexual assault and rape. Now, the interesting thing here, I watched the whole deposition. There was no evidence at all. Now, I'm not booty clapping for anyone, right? I don't stand any chances in doing this, but if you look at the case, the evidence they're using is him making a statement. You can grab them by X because women tend to like that. I'm quoting him, guys. Don't come for me. If you're a celebrity. Now, what happened is a lady basically mirrored that statement that he made. She didn't come up with the same story until later on. He was like, "Oh, I took this woman furniture shopping. I tried it. I simped out. I still didn't get anywhere." So the lady mirrored that furniture shopping experience, and then she said it ended with grape juice. But basically, yeah, no evidence. Interesting.
Yeah. So the civil thing, and I want you to land the plane and perhaps have a follow-up question to the laying of those facts. But the civil thing is, I think the standard that they use is called preponderance of evidence, right? Meaning it's all circumstantial evidence, and if you can stack up a bunch of evidence, and I just look at the seeming weight of it from afar without even checking if it's valid or whatever, it's not the same as criminal court, not the same kind of scrutiny in terms of evidence and discovery and all that kind of stuff. Completely different standard, and that's why they can't put you in jail, right? But you will pay $5 million. And this is what a lot of corporations are afraid. Well, this is what, when you talk about that litigious society that America, it is in the civil realm, right? It's not, that's where the issue is. But yes, you don't need quote unquote evidence. It's just, you could just stack a bunch of stuff up and it just looks crazy. You're like, okay, you win. But anyways,
Yeah, actually, this is slightly off topic, but a lot of feminists, like old school feminists, tell women actually don't try to sue someone in the criminal court, sue them in a civil court. These are kind of the reasons why, because you're most likely more likely to win in a certain case like that, as you mentioned, probability of balances and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, so the interesting thing here is, right, obviously, Trump is trying to come back. Griner is trying to come back. She's trying to be on her grind. And if you look at this case situation, it's coming out more or less.
you know what? That's actually not bad, guys. I gotta give it to you. I know we beat up on you for your lame humor, but go ahead. That was smooth.
Right. So yeah, so both of them are on their comebacks, and the interesting thing here, obviously, is they're coming for Trump. And here's the thing: obviously, both groups of people have certain advantages, right? Trump has his main support groups. You've got the gun-loving guys, you've got the Christians, you've got the white conservative, etc. So he's got his base, and that's not going to change. I think what they're trying to do, obviously, is trying to the wishy-washy sort of people, like, let's say, Dr. Thunder, in the middle centrist type, libertarian types, from actually going down that angle.
Okay, so and just put a capstone on that with, I was asking regarding where Dr. Thunder started when it comes to coalition building. throw a wild card out there. Like you're a certain percentage of the population, right? You have to gather other people into the tent with you. You just mentioned a particular tent where you have some Christians and you have some gun people, and you have some crazy, just kind of crazy business radical types, right? Um, who benefit from particular tax situations, and then you have the pragmatists in foreign policy who just like the fact that Trump says, "Hey, why are we pushing Putin into the hand of Xi Jinping? Why can't we? He will go see. He saw Little Rocket Man. That's the kind of guy he is. Some people like that aspect actually. So those are real things. Like they're like, hey, go see Little Rocket Man. Let's talk to me. Let's stop acting all holier than thou. Let's try to make some goddamn peace because half of the crap that's going on in the world, we probably started it. But with regards to all these groups that you have to bring into the tent with you, what groups, by way of shared interests, can black men form a coalition with? Just free ball it, throw something out there. Maybe you can join the Brittney Griner's group. Maybe you could get something out of that. But Kaizo, what's go ahead. What do you say?
Yeah, okay. So I think a few groups that black people can join is obviously one of them you guys are not gonna like, obviously, right? Because you guys are sensitive against certain things. So if I say it, it's not gonna look good. So I'll ignore the obvious one there.
Okay, go ahead.
They have power right now, so that's the thing. But anyways, a more plausible group that we can actually join is school associations, right?
Now, okay, so let me just do a little bit of expanding, because from the general point of view of education, and I'm going to ask Dr. Thunder this. So if you're like, okay, interests, black men, black boys, education, okay, whom else is interested in that education question? I'm sure if you say education, I'm sure, okay, you can get in. The Chinese are going to be with you. The Indians are going to be with you, right? There's certain groups, maybe some immigrant groups. You're like, you can gather up the immigrant. They're going to be with you in perhaps the kinds of things you might want to say with regards to improving education, right? But it cannot. But but are those the kinds of issues? And you can comment if you want, Kaizo. But this is really Dr. Thunder on the education point. Are there actual issues with regards to education that black men can bring forward that other people whom are interested in education as well, such as those other groups that we mentioned, will actually be like, hey, yeah, we also want these changes, or the change is very different, where it's like, what black people say is completely different from what these other people are saying. Maybe these people are saying math is not racist, and maybe most black people are saying math is racist. Just, but am I making sense? Can you find enough questions in there, Dr. Thunder, or do you want me to?
Yeah, no, I mean, so one of the issues, so we do have to itemize, and I appreciate that you sort of separated it out, because we were talking about black people, and we know that what's good for certain black people isn't necessarily good for other black people. The state of the education system is a testament to that. As far as percentages, we're looking at close to 70% of the black college attendants are female, so only about 30% male. Now that's not because what has caused that is one party has done a better job of making certain kinds of alliances. Now it's been at the great detriment of the culture, the society, and it's created a great deal more dysfunction in the black community. So there's been payment due because of that. However, one party has done a much better job of creating these sort of alliances in the education system, right? For instance, more scholarship money, more support, even more support from private corporations and publicly traded corporations uh, for black females, right? Also, black females have done a better job of sort of taking the temperature. Let's see which way is the wind blowing, and creating allies and alliances with those that were doing better, significantly better. Again, it's been typically at the detriment of the black community, but it has been tremendously beneficial for black females, right? So I think we could look at some of the things that black females have done, and then we can say, okay, what are some versions of these things that black men can do? What are some ways that we can look at the successes that black females can have, sans the destruction to the black community, and see if we can build something from that. One of the ways that they have sort of, been successful is the way that they vote, right? They've been able to get Democrats to champion a number of issues that have been at least somewhat beneficial to black females. And
it sounds like the way all these other people in democracies do it, right? So it's like,
right.
Anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see it. I don't see it as being earth-shattering or revolutionary and innovative or any of that. It's just, where's the best deal, and being unashamed about whatever the fallout is. It's like, hey, we gonna get ours, and so what are things that black men can do, perhaps with less destruction to the community, that in similar.
I want to ask about that community aspect, because I think the key aspect of the chain here, because you mentioned good for one side, but not good for the community. And I'm wondering if there is a side whom is doing something perhaps actively and it's good for them, and it's quote unquote not good for the community. It always seems like, well, maybe we should be talking about two separate groups here. Maybe even if just conceptually, why are these two, maybe
yeah,
it's
no,
like,
I agree.
No, at this point.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. So if one party has obviously been acting as if they don't really belong to this so-called community because they're willing to do things that would be destructive to the community, what incentive or what reason would the injured party, what incentive would they have to continue to champion, the community? Why don't they just say, hey, we're two separate parties. We're going to get what we need to get. You certainly have gotten what you needed to get. Why not operate in that way? And that's what a lot of folks are doing. And I've been saying this whole, black men are the new political X factor, to the extent that we actually throw off a lot of that sort of weight of, we're responsible for the community. So we throw that stuff off.
Is it not
do that?
an inert gas at this point, in the sense that this, yeah, sure, there's this element there, but it's not actually active. In fact, because it doesn't quote unquote do these things, which one aspect of which, is the Machiavellianism that we talked about. We started this whole thing off with. So, hey, how can we be more Machiavellian like this other group over here is part of what you just said. And then, if there is actually no activity there right now, then how can it be an X factor if it's actually not going to? It doesn't seem like it. So if somebody can say, here it is, I'm going to harness it this way, then it's like, then it's a possible. It has not been. It's like it's switched off right now. If I'm making sense, or do you disagree?
I don't know that it's switched off. I think what's happening is more folks are becoming aware, and we know that over the last several elections, there's been a larger percentage of black men that have voted one of three ways. Not at all Republican or third party. Those are three things that have been, that combination of things have been on the rise for the last several elections. And and I think that's not anything to sneeze at. I just think that there have been too many sort of visceral moments over the last several elections over that time period, and especially over the last, we'll say, 5 or 6 years, that folks are like, wait a minute here, continuing to vote for Democrats doesn't seem like that's helping me. And obviously in this case, it's obviously helping them, but they don't even care about the same things that we care about. So why not consider voting a different way? So
Let me ask LAR this. LAR, I would suspect that LAR, do you vote? You don't have to tell me which way you vote or not. Do you vote?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. You vote. I would suspect you probably, have voted Democrat. And
All of them, actually. I voted Democrat, Republican, Independent, Green. It doesn't,
okay. So let me ask you this. Given what Dr. Thunder said, one of the questions that comes to mind will be, well, okay, is there one side historically, right, that gives more benefit to the group as a group? And if we just talk about, it puts a slight historical context. We know there was a switch. We know the whole Dixiecrat stuff, right? The Southern Democrat racists switching to becoming Southern Republican racists, right? And all that other stuff. And maybe it doesn't even matter. But is there a side that you could say, hey, if you're going to put your bet on it, well, it should be this side, because it could be the Democratic Party, right? It could be like, hey, you know what? Sure, black men, you didn't do what you needed to do. You were behind this other person, but now you realize it's a separate group. Actually, it's like, oh, okay, cool. I'm my own group. My bad. Okay, but does it mean I should leave that party though? Because maybe they ain't nothing for me with the Repubs. That's what do you say about that, Eliar?
I think you flip flop back and forth because basically you trade a no for a maybe, and normally wind up with little to nothing. Because even historically, like part of Jim Crow was had to do with voting. So everybody, you had the poll tax, the grandfather tax, all these clauses and all that other stuff, because people had voted and people didn't like how the demographics of politics started slowly changing. So, and that was a Republican aspect.
That's for both of you. Yeah, it's for LAR and the super chat.
yeah, from
Says,
Salty Balls, salute Doc. Thank you very much.
Shout out. But yeah, no, go ahead, LAR. I figured we'll just roll with the punches like that.
No, it's all good. So now it's like, I think for the last, I don't know, few decades, the Democratic Party has been giving maybes, and we'll say the Republican Party was saying no. And now what you're seeing is the Democratic Party say no, and the Republican Party say, well, maybe we'll see. We're like, so you're seeing people kind of switch from one to the other. So ultimately, I think it's kind of so it's a chess stalemate. Like they're not going to actually make a move. So again, in the political sense, yeah, in the political sense, I think, like when you were talking about Machiavellian earlier, I'll say this: I think black men have a more difficult time in America to be Machiavellian, because partially the enemy of my enemy is my friend, but unfortunately, what enemy of my enemy will work with us as a friend anyways? Because they would rather be a double agent than actual protecting from a quote unquote enemy. So because we're pretty much every group's enemy at some point, whether it's justified or not. So it's more difficult for us to be Machiavellian. If you look at all the stuff that happened in this country in the last 50 years, you would assume that a lot of other groups would have this country's government's eye on them, but they don't.
So Kaiser, you want to respond to what LAR just said there regarding the Machiavellian point that he ended with, which is well, how could you be Machiavellian in a place where there's no one that's going to work with you, and so on. And prior to that, he mentioned that maybe some people don't want to take. Oh, maybe he didn't say this. Let me say it. Maybe some people don't want to take the responsibility of. Maybe some people are waiting and hoping and wishing, and especially with, I'm sorry, what? Dr.
Here,
Thunder, you
I
gonna say something?
wanted to say something real quick. It was a response to something that you said. There's actually no evidence of any switch from Democrat to Republican. When you look at that, all of the politicians, you can't actually locate this switch that the Democrats always say. See, look, all of the good folks switched to Democrat, and then it left all the deleterious evil folks to move to
That
Republican. Go ahead.
that's not what happened in that way. They
Right.
were basically alluding to the mentors. The mentors were on one side, and then the people they were mentees were on the other side. So because even with if I'm not mistaken, wasn't like somebody brought up Joe Biden? If I'm not mistaken, wasn't Strom Thurmond one of his mentors?
Yep.
See, so that's what the switch was like. That's what they're trying to say.
Yeah, and but there's no, and there's a I can't think of her name right now. She's a professor, black female, and she's on the conservative side. She's done a number of videos. You can find a number of videos that she's done on this this supposed switch that took place, and there really is no actual really is no actual switch. And if anything, any sort of aligning with the Republicans was really based on sort of limited government, these kinds of principles, as it more than it was based on, well, I feel more at home with the racist. So anyhow, go ahead.
Let me say this real quick, because I had to look it up just for sure. There's a part of Strom Thurmond's page where it says Thurmond was a member of the Democratic Party until 1964, when he joined the Republican Party for the remainder of his legislative career. He also ran for president in 1948 as a Dixiecrat. So part of that thing deals with that type of scenario. So
Yeah,
Dr. Thunder, so it's an
Yeah.
overblown narrative. That's like some people switch, but they
Yeah.
made it seem like there was some kind of a. Is that what you're?
Yeah, and the switch for the most part was based on what seemed to be a philosophy switch, not based on a philosophy switch based on limited government, X, Y, and Z,
Mhm.
not based on these are the ones that want to have slaves, these ones that didn't want to have slaves, these are the ones that like the civil rights movement, these are the ones that didn't like it. It wasn't that kind of thing, and that's usually the way that it gets presented when Democrats bring it. Look, I think they're all hogwash. I think it's all hogwash, and I don't play the Democrat Republican game because neither of them have been particularly beneficial for black men. Okay,
But the thing is,
So-
okay, it's like, okay, but
Yeah.
is it possibly true that relatively there's not one that has been better? Let's say within context. Let's say, oh, I'm over here in this part of the Midwest. As a matter of fact, it was the Democratic Party that did X, Y, and Z for me. The Republicans actually did this farm bill and killed us. Something like that, right? Those things do happen, right?
Yeah, I think that there have been a number of. I mean, look, there's been more civil rights movement on the Democrat side in modern history, right? So I would, so I don't have any. I don't have any negative to say about that.
I've got a question.
Go ahead.
But you don't like integration, Dr. Thunder. Anyways, I'm just kidding. Go ahead, guys.
I don't.
You want to go
Yeah,
back?
I don't
Yeah,
want to
see,
go back.
I don't think it matters.
Just Kyle, you know.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think it matters which group did what, because obviously these were all rich, very powerful people, so they played the game or whichever side. We all know this. So I think the main issue is, okay, which state level, which city council level politicians are you voting in? I'll give you an example. In Nairobi, right, there's a guy called Sakaja. This is a guy who promised so much, right? He's not really delivered. So guess what? I'm actually going to vote next time for this kind of local stuff. Okay, cleaning up the streets is important for someone like me. Black Americans, you might have very unique, maybe education reforms that someone is trying to push. I don't know, but you have to do the research, because I don't really see in a very developed country like America, does the presidency really cause that
Oh
much
yeah,
difference?
no.
Was it
Yeah,
enough?
I think that the local policies, local issues are really the most impactful on your everyday life. If it's a Democrat or a Republican, there would be about a 3% difference in policy that would actually affect you on a day-to-day sort of basis. Now,
You mean on the presidential level, that's the low impact, the 3% impact.
that's the
but
low impact
on
on the presidential,
the
because
local
all of
side.
the folks that actually carry out the policy, I mean, so our government, first of all, is designed for gridlock. So you have Democrats and Republicans there, and they've battling against each other to sort of keep things basically the same. And then the folks that actually carry out the will of the president, those are like 97%, 98% of those are the same people as what it was for the last guy, because you have to have the same.
That's how you
people.
run a bureaucracy. You can't be switching MFers every 4 years. Yeah, that's how you run a bureaucracy. Yeah, so the so-called deep state. Go ahead.
Right. So that's not really where you can see the massive change. The biggest change you're going to see is locally. That's the stuff that is actually going to impact you. And it's one of the reasons why a lot of folks tend to advocate for limited government, because limited federal government means that you'll have less of a massive change, president to president. Now, obviously, the president can do stuff like press the red button and get us in war, and all that stuff is obviously massive. So I'm not suggesting that the president is of no importance. I'm just saying, on the balance of averages, I'm saying that you're not going to experience very much change, societal change.
So Kaizo,
can I ask Kaizo something?
because I think Kaizo. Go ahead.
I'm blind to this, but has you said Kenya, right? Kaizo? Well, okay. I want to was there ever like a Strom Thurmond type in that environment? Like was there ever does it have a history of people like that? Is what I'm trying to figure out.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't know if you could compare the governments if you don't have any kind of equivalence to it, where in that scenario.
Yeah, I think Kaizo has got some struggle African something.
Yeah, we'll let him answer the question
Jesus.
about the struggle government and the struggle internet.
Is this Mike V that just came up?
It most certainly is.
How you doing, sir?
I'm good. At yourself?
I'm doing all right.
All right. Cool. So, yeah, Kaiser was mentioning about, and welcome, Mike V, was talking about the local aspects, right? And the local aspect is also where the organization begins and where where you actually have the most impact, blah, 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 right? So we've been talking about coalition building and all these other kinds of things, right? Institutions and whatnot. Now, let me ask you this. Let's go back to Mike V and ask you the question here. Are Black men insufficiently Machiavellian? Because we're talking realpolitik when it comes to with regards to groups that prop you up, right? If you are Brittney Griner and you have a particular group affiliation that you can virtue signal to, and you guys have mutual benefit to each other, they prop you up and get influence in political blah, 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 right? How do Black men get that group form coalition, do this and benefit from the status and legitimacy that it seems to bring and political influence? That's a huge question. But are black men insufficiently Machiavellian to get this done? Right. Well, what's your answer to that? All that crap.
I think that black men, and thank you for bringing me up on this panel. I greatly appreciate it. I think the problem here is that black men are not punching above their weight politically. We have political capital because we exist in a lot of these key battleground swing states that are priority for winning any sort of presidential election. Now, what happens is we don't necessarily show up in the numbers that we need to in order to effect change, or we vote in ways that go against our best interests, i.e. we'll vote for, the 45th and not get anything out of it. And so we don't really focus on the local side. We don't focus on the ballot initiatives that's there. And when it comes to representation, we don't seem to have a clear idea of who should be our representation. For example, there's this so-called Ice Cube effect where we have black men lusting for Ice Cube for representation, or lusting for Killer Mike to be our representation, but we don't look at the actual black men who are doing the actual work on the ground. Like Mondale Robinson, the mayor in North Carolina, one of the youngest. When we talk about other mayors that are putting in some significant work, like what's his face out there in Stockton, California, Michael Tubbs, when he was one of the youngest black mayors in the country. And so we don't typically look for those type of black men to have our representation. We look for other entertainers and other sort of masculine avatars that don't actually have any sort of political capital at all. And so we have a big problem with political literacy. And we also have a problem with just understanding the process of how systems in government work.
Okay, so one thing that dovetails with what Dr. Thunder says, and I want you, Dr. Thunder, to respond to perhaps what Mike's response to this would be. It's about that Booker T. Washington point, right? It's about how do you go about creating yourself as a valuable node in the network, and then start building that coalition such that there is a group around which you can rally and that has political influence and power. The question being, well, how would Booker T. Washington go about formulating that, of which you started giving the answer, right? Mike V, let me ask you, would you be on the Booker T. Washington side of things, and how would you define that side, by the way, in terms of, is it about industry skills of the individual and forming institutions based on actual work that needs to be done, like it's an institute that is based on the development of, certain technology and industry and such, solving actual problems like water treatment in a particular valley somewhere, right? That's why I have this institute, not to sit around talking about Black history. Anyways, Booker T. Washington, will be on that side? What do you think about his approach? And then Dr. Thunder, I want you to respond, and then we'll take it around again.
So I think Booker T's approach worked for the time that he was actually doing it, in that early 20th century, coming out of the 19th century. I think I think his tactics worked for that time being. I'm of a different mindset. I'm probably closer to maybe Nkrumah, or maybe even Thomas Sankara. That's if you wanted to identify my way of thinking and tactics. And so I think that to answer your question, I think that the approach that we need has to be a multi-pronged approach, one that focuses on political representation, institutional builders, systems in governance process, governance across the water as well. We need to expand our battlefield by actually engaging the continent, engaging the Caribbean, engaging Latin America, engaging West Asia, Central Asia. I think we should be focusing on trying to galvanize our numbers in larger capacity, because when we talk about white supremacy, it's an actual global thing, and that's what we're up against right now. That's kind of what's weighing down on a lot of our progress as a whole. We see that right now with the banning of books by Black authors in a lot of these states and in a lot of these libraries. We see that also with banning of DEI programs that largely Black men would be able to benefit from if those programs were to be actually properly facilitated for, in these workplaces. We've seen this right now in Alabama with Hyundai and Kia. At the Hyundai Kia plant, where Black men are being discriminated against by white men in the workplace, not having the upward mobility that is necessary. There's an ongoing case right now within the EEOC and the Department of Justice against this facility and the white men in these workplaces discriminating against Black men. We also see this at the Ford motor plant, where you have nooses being put up in Black men's lockers in these sort of manufacturing facilities. This is something that we're going up against that we're not fully prepared for because we're not properly organized at that level. And so we got to start working with institutions like the AFL-CIO, start working with, what is it? The Black Fraternity of Police. I think that's what it's called. Black lawyers as well. 2/3 of our lawyers come out of HBCU, so we got to start working from that angle as well, and start working with other established institutions that are already there for our representation. So I think it has to be multi-pronged.
Okay, so Dr. Thunder, respond. A, multi-pronged. B, more of an international, institutions-based, almost, shall we say, Pan-African type of approach, and so on and so forth. But I asked him, obviously, because I wanted him to expand upon the whole Booker T. Washington and such. But go ahead and respond to anything you heard there.
I mean, I don't disagree with anything that's said. What I want to see happen is Black men have to become less party loyal and less in more agenda and policy specific. And that's more or less what I'm hearing him say, saying it a different way, but I'm hearing him say that you have to be more knowledgeable about what the actual policy is, what the process is, and individual politicians, and being willing to, on issues that you agree with, to be able to partner so that you can get a mutual benefit. So I'm totally for that. I'm now where we're probably different is I'm a third party. I've been a third party voter for some time. Now I'm still willing to support politicians, even if they're Democrats or Republicans, if they're championing a particular issue that I have interest in, then I will do that. But I also agree that far too few Black men, I'd say Black people in general, but especially Black men, are knowledgeable enough about the way that this stuff works to actually get something that will benefit them. And the Ice Cube effect, I think, was less about propping up a sort of masculine avatar, someone that's not actually going to do anything. It was less about that, in my estimation. But I do take your point about, the fact that Ice Cube is not a politician. And so, that's going to be of little assistance when it comes to trying to get, some policy through. So anyhow, yep.
So, Kaizo, let's go back to you here, okay? Let's restart this conversation. We're talking about realpolitik, which has to do with, again, the use of practical and, shall I say, pragmatic tactics to get to perhaps idealistic goals, right? And part of, power in politics is just basic group social dynamics. That means you have to form coalitions with these people and they'll prop you up. If you are a crazy wild man like Donald Trump, great comedian, you'll get a certain type of, you'll pick up from the edges some crazy people who like that kind of stuff, who don't mind a bull in the china shop. And you have, some racists and some guns and some people who like some kind of tax advantages and some people, again, whom like the foreign policy stance, which is a real thing. If you have a pragmatic foreign policy stance, Trump has a lot to, well, at least that he says he tends not to be able to pull shit off. But that's a separate conversation. Okay. Now, having said all that, we've gone through this question several times about the coalitions that you can form, that you can build. So I want to take it back to you, Kaiser, for you to throw out another one, right? Like whom you can actually form a coalition with, because I don't think we settled on it. You started talking about local politics and certain types of things, but whom? Because the first round took us to the education route. Like, okay, if education is important, I asked the question: can you form a coalition around education with other groups such as the Chinese and the Indians that your interests will be aligned? Dr. Thunder started to give us some of the nuances in that area that'll make it such that maybe that cause some of the imbalance between black men and black women and something like that in education. But Kaizo, can you envision an objective where you don't bring in any particular kind of no special ingredients, but black people, Chinese people, Indian people can form a coalition together with regards to some objective, right, that is of paramount importance to black men and boys, and you just go about it that way without your special history mattering? Okay, it's a conceptual and intuitive question I'm asking you, so go ahead and get us started there, and we'll see what comes up.
Yeah. So okay, if we're gonna stick it to black men, right? There's gonna actually be a few what you guys call allies that we could ally to, and actually formulate things that are going to be useful for our people. So one thing that I think is important for black boys especially is, if you look at the education. I know we're going back to education a little bit, but it's just a way for us to kind of begin somewhere. I've looked at the education backgrounds of black boys, and it's not as high as it should be, right? So one way and one group that we can actually attach ourselves to as black people is the immigrants, right? Not specifically Indians or anyone else, but simply immigrants. If you attach yourself to immigrants, right, and you vote towards certain, education-based policies, you might be able to actually kind of improve certain things that black boys don't have. Education focus, right? Because obviously with affirmative action, it benefits white women way more than it benefits black boys. So if that's the case, right, what you're gonna do is, right, and let me give the logic here is, immigrants are gonna come in with a second language none other than English. They're gonna get funding, right, for these programs, and we can actually be getting the same fundings for the black boys. You can't just go around being a minority and then focusing only on that specific minority group. You do need to attach yourself to another minority group to kind of make yourself a more larger minority. So I'll say, get the funding, attach yourself to immigrants, specifically African immigrants, because at that point they will still become black at some point, right? And they can integrate themselves into the communities.
Yes, they'll become black at some point. Let's go to you, LAR, there, especially with that. Is there a way, okay, for some kind of group where you're sharing some kind of money with these tethers out here, okay, trying to because of certain interests that they have, and then the government will give them. Is there any the African immigrant? Is that a no-go? Because that's already that's already doesn't work.
Yeah, I think we've tried that and it didn't work. Like I think a lot of times when it comes to, we don't say, as far as Black America, that we've had to try numerous things. So a lot of the times when they say try this, try that, it's already been done. It's like it's basically saying try this and try that again for the second, third, or fourth time. It's not actually like try it and see if it works. So I think what winds up happening is with Black America. I think people are weird when it comes to what you think is sensible when it comes to Black America. Like when they'll tell somebody else the history, the biggest factor, like whatever happened in the past is probably gonna happen again in the future. That's what happens in history. But with us, it's like, oh no, that happened, but no, this time it's brand new. No, that happened too, but this time if you do it, it's new. And it's like, well, no, like everybody else can learn from what happened in the past and say this works and this doesn't. Something Dr. Thunder brought up about the politician, the political part, and I didn't think about it until just now, was most of our black leaders who changed policy weren't politicians. So that's why it goes that way. Like the vast majority of the people in our group, the only politicians I can think about that were supposed to help change policy were Barack Obama, Shirley Chisholm, and I know I'm missing somebody, but and what is the judge's name? Is it Thurman?
Thurgood Marshall.
Thurgood Marshall. Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody else is pretty much a activist, quote unquote leader, somebody in church, or some athlete or entertainer. And they got the policy pushed farther than the actual politicians. So our history doesn't do that. Like, we've had the Congressional Black Caucus for years. Any policy come through?
Okay, so first of all, Mr. Mike V and then Dr. Thunder, I want you to respond to what has been said so far. Number one, the pessimism with regards to, well, first of all, we've tried this Black Pan-African, perhaps a Pan-African view before, didn't work. Is it one of the things that's worth trying again? First of all, let's acknowledge that we've tried it before, right? And is it worth trying again? And then, well, take that amongst other things that were mentioned with regards to education and everything else.
Yeah, there is a timing thing. So even if you have tried something in the past, it might not have been the right timing. So I will give that, I'll give that, some weight. And then to Mike V's point, it's not just about trying one thing. It would be multiple things, right? So it would be a multi-pronged sort of approach to dealing with this. So it wouldn't, and it could be a combination. It could have been the wrong combination of things. Maybe individually those things have been tried, but maybe this different combination in a different time period, maybe that's going to be the deal. And especially when we start talking about votes. Well, when we tried it before, the votes were going to lay this way, but now we have more folks in, so let's go back and try that again. Now we have the right balance and we think we can get it through. So the timing component, I think, is critical. So I will give that weight. But I also hear what LER is saying, and that is often is the case that rather than actually coming up with new ideas, people just recycle old stuff that didn't work in the past. And there's no real reason to believe that anything's different so that it would work now. But you gotta tell them something, right? So, so I kind of hear both sides of that. So anyhow.
Mm-hmm. So Mike V, education was mentioned, and also I want you to bring in the tech aspect as part of what you do on your Black Brain Trust channel, right? So education, I've heard you say things about, well, maybe there are not enough Black male teachers and that it is important. I want you to address this particular question. So there's one question in here, which is about, is it actually the case that these white teachers, like my white calculus teacher, did not want me to pass the calculus class? My best calculus teacher was a Jewish lady, and a white dude. Yeah, interesting Jewish lady. Anyways, so there's that aspect of a question in there. But then there is the, okay, well, if education is a place where you form coalitions, can you form a coalition that is based on actual principles rather than it having to be a uniquely Black thing? And whom are these other people whom we share the same interest in the education space that you can form a coalition with? So education, tech, and yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so in regards to education, I think there is a cultural component to this that has not been respected over the the past few generations, and which is why you see a lot of black boys failing within their respective public institutions and where they live, places like Baltimore, some of these heavily weighed black cities. And so not enough black teachers, also not enough resources allocated in these areas as well. If I remember correctly, in Chicago, they had redistributed a lot of the resources from some of the predominantly black schools in Chicago in the K through 12 sector, and that reallocated in some of the predominantly white areas. Big Olympic size racetracks and Olympic size swimming pools that they didn't even need, that most black kids didn't even have access to themselves. And so these are some of the areas of concern when it comes to public education and black people, and more importantly, black boys and their numbers and why they're so low. And so they're not getting adequate support in the areas needed, primarily because the property taxes. Black people are not actually the predominantly homeowners, and so the property tax that is used to fund these public schools, they're not actually coming from the black community as a whole, and the ones that do come don't actually go to those schools anyways. And so these are some of the multifaceted issues that are actually impacting why black boys may be failing in these areas, because we know that when we put them in some of these all male schools, I forget the one out of Chicago, I think it just got closed a few weeks ago because of lack of funding again. They had 99% matriculation rate. And so we know that when the resources are available, when you put black men in the classroom to teach, and when you have black male guidance counselors and so on and so forth, there actually is success there. So at the end of the day, finding the resources, human capital, as well as access to financial capital makes a lot of sense here.
Okay, and you may not care to speculate, but so you've given me some kind of like a date from a data point of view. If I hover over it, if I look to the left, and over here on the left, I have black male teachers, guidance counselors, and such. But as I look over to the right, if they're white, the black kids do better. You may not care to speculate, but do you care to speculate as to exactly what's going on there? And is it the case that this must be accounted for? How about the green people and the blue people? What does everybody need a particular percentage? Should we cocoon ourselves up into little groups in order to be able to learn calculus? Or go ahead. You don't have to respond, or if you have a response to what you may hear me trying to say, go ahead and respond.
I think there's a lot more pressure that black males may be functioning under, that other groups don't function under. The environment that they're in, the lack of resources at home. We know that some of these schools now are actually putting community refrigerators inside the school so that they can actually have access to more food, nutritional resources, so they can bring home these bags of food, so that families don't have to go hungry. We know that a lot of black boys go to school hungry. And they also playing, roles in other areas, such as they're, redistributing their labor to pick up other people from school, taking care of other people's grandmothers or other people's aunts. There's a lot of areas where black males are being pulled in different directions that they don't have the bandwidth for, and so the lack of focus becomes a problem as well. It's hard to focus when you have adult responsibilities as a child.
Can you talk about, so what makes the black males? Okay, I know the basic answer to the question. Girls and boys learn differently, right? Boys need someone that's more hands-on. Girls can be more satisfied sitting looking at a book, and they can do that for longer periods of time. And then we know that the education system has been intentionally feminized. 93% of the high school valedictorians and class presidents are female. 93% are female, and that's not a new stat. And that's also not a specific to black stat. That's just a general statistic. So we know that there's different ways that they learn. But given that by and large the black boys and the black girls are going to be coming from the same households, and given some of the factors that you were just listing, if you understand the question, why do you think that the black boys and the black girls seem to be outperforming the black boys?
They have a better social network.
Okay. Yep. Yep.
Nice,
you had a question
nice,
about you had a question about tech, Ike.
Yeah, I had a question about tech, and because it dovetailed with the education point, and yes, you may go ahead and respond there. Is there, let's say, for example, we're talking about tech and we're talking about founding, and maybe right now, in the down market where money is expensive, this is the time to build. There are actually going to be a lot of resources. A lot of people got fired from Google or laid off or whatever. So there are going to be people out there that maybe you can work with, if you will. And you guys are builders, and you guys are talking about maybe venture capitalists and whom you're going to go see. And how do you build an ecosystem around tech? Maybe this is one of the little status group areas that you want to focus on, such as, if you have certain people focus in the banking sector, or the Indians are in tech, or whatever, right? So how would you go about building that politically now? We know that, individually you got to go and study the tech stuff, learn the code, do all those other kinds of things. But politically, how do you foster? And I've asked you something like this before, where you talked about opportunity zones, right? So it's a continuation of that same kind of a question here. It's about building with the coalition aspect I want you to focus on here. In other words, how do you build whom are you partnering with, right, to kind of create this kind of thing with that, well, there's benefit for them as well if more black men were in tech, and if you were able to, go ahead.
Yeah, I think opportunity zones are pretty much a dead platform now. They'll expire in 2026, so there's no legislation to bring it back at this point, and so that's a dead platform now. But to answer your question, I do think that there are areas at the state, at the local, state, and federal level that we can actually leverage, right? And we start talking about some of the partnerships that can be had at the federal level. That's your STEM agencies, the Department of Energy, the Department of Transportation, and then you have the Department of Agriculture, and then you start talking about NASA. NASA is probably one of the biggest contributors right now to HBCUs, and that's because you have black men in there representing at the directory level, at the directors level, engaging at that part and finding those resources, $2.73 billion partnerships with HBCUs and bringing them in as multi-year partners on that level. And then you start talking about HUD, housing and urban development, smart cities. That's where all of that stuff comes in, partnering with those institutions that are already available. And then you start talking about land banking, taking over vacant properties, distressed properties, vacant parcels. You start talking about community trust, putting those properties into those community trusts so that you can have it for 50 years or 99 years and then have complete ownership of it. These sort of lower level areas such as land banks and community trusts actually function or will be a function for reparations, because when you start talking about turning over land, putting it back into the community, there has to be some ownership of that. And then you start talking about how you're going to get funding for it, then you're going to need a land bank. You're going to need black banks to actually be the fiduciaries for that, so that they can handle all those big lump sums of money, like we saw in Jackson, Mississippi earlier this year, where the White House worked with the Department of Justice and the Office of Civil Rights to send $800 million to Mayor Chokwe Lumumba, because the state, the conservatives in the state, like Governor Tate, was keeping the funding away from the predominantly black city of Jackson, so that they can actually fix their water and sanitation issues at the ground level. And so they basically put sanctions on black people at that level. And so they found a way to go around the governor and the state itself by going to the federal government and partnering with them at the Office of Civil Rights and Department of Justice. And so there's variety of ways of doing this, but to create a entire ecosystem around this, you're going to have nonprofit organizations, partnering with other institutions such as state and federal, and even the White House for that matter. There's a lot of resources available. We just need to organize around that.
Hey, I
Very well
wanted
put.
to.
Quick statement about education.
Oh, okay.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
The biggest difference with education as far as black males are concerned in America is we're the only group that's supposed to go to school and play sports so the school can make money. So what goes on with us, we're viewed completely different, whether the teachers, if we are athletes or not. When you think about high school and college, and that's supposed to be academia, guess what they want? They want the football team and the basketball team to win and make money on both levels. And those people are supposed to, that money that they make is supposed to generate to everybody else in the school. So a lot of times these boys, our boys don't have enough time to actually be kids in school because we're supposed to be playing sports and feeding the coach's family and bringing in revenue for t-shirts and sell tickets. That doesn't go for everybody else. So they don't have that kind of responsibility to just focus on, you're looked at as a loser technically if you're just a good student. It's like, why can't you be a good student and give us 150 yards on the field so you can sell out this stadium? It's a completely different mindset that we get.
Hey,
Dr. Thunder,
I
what would you say?
I wanted to follow up. So, Mike, I asked you a question. You said that the girls have a better social network. Okay. And of course, I agree with that. So, my follow up question is what can be done to improve the boys' social network? Yeah. I mean, it's a pretty blanket, it's a pretty general question, but let me know what
So to answer your question, Dr. Thunder, they're actually working on this right now. The commission to study the status of black men and boys has been implemented at the congressional level, and so there has been, the recent infrastructure and inflation bill that was passed actually allocated, I think, $14 million to that to that focus group. Under, if I remember correctly, it's Frederica Wilson, a congressional woman in the Congressional Black Caucus, who actually put this together. And so she has a litany of black men that are coming forth every single quarter. They run it about 4 quarters a year. I think they started in 2021. And they actually bring black men in who are experts in these areas, who have some ideas that they can put forth and that they're actually taking advantage of. And so we see things like the Hidden Genius Project out in California, that in Oakland, that's actually very successful at becoming a social network for black boys in STEM. And then we start talking about the Black Man's Lab in Georgia, that's actually being a social network for developing masculinity in black men and black boys. We also see the same thing with Sharik El-Mekki, who runs the Center for Black, I actually put in the guest chat a few minutes ago, the Center for Black Education. He runs that, and he's been very successful at running that. And it's actually a safe space and a social space for black men, black male teachers and mentors, for engaging black boys in K through 12. And so there are these networks popping up now, and there is a lot of federal interest in this, especially at the congressional level. But on Democrat side, but not on the Republican side. And so when you have to get bipartisan support, that becomes the biggest challenge, because you need to get those resources, and you're going to have to find a way to shoehorn it into bigger bills, where you have to actually work with some members, like maybe 1 or 2 members, or you're going to need at least 15 members. We don't have a majority in the Senate right now for in terms of the Democrats, and so it's hard to get things passed because they just get struck down pretty quickly. They don't even leave the House at all. And so, to answer your question, you do have some of these social networks popping up. You do have I forget the one in Miami. It's run by black men for STEM. They've been very successful down there. I have to see if I can find a link for that. We know that. Yeah. Go ahead.
So something I find interesting, and this has been my claim, and this has been my usual criticism of the diversity and inclusion stuff. The throwing everything into a pail, what it tends to do is it tends to push the issues concerning black men and boys to the bottom. They don't get considered. And my preference, rather than throwing everything into the same bucket and then coming up with a bunch of general principles that seem to basically poorly serve every group, but there clearly is a hierarchy where some of the latecomers, and it seems issues associated with behavior over immutable characteristics seem to be promoted. But my thing is, look, target something that is is an area of weakness, and obviously issues concerning black men and boys that were at the bottom in every category. Basically, focus on those, laser focus on them, like some of these programs that you're talking about, and that's actually how you improve those situations. But what seems to happen also is whenever these sort of initiatives sprout up, there seems to be a lot of animus. Well, animus is not the right word. A lot of pushback from black feminists, so that they can, well, wait a minute, where's ours? Even though, without actually even necessarily focusing on black female issues, what it is that generally that Democrats are doing tends to serve them better already. What do you think of that?
In my experience, and based on the research I've been doing the last 5-6 years, the pushback isn't coming from black feminists; it's actually coming from white men. If we think about, reparations for black farmers, for example, that's coming from white men, the pushback.
Right.
Despite the fact that they were getting, the resources they wanted under the Trump administration, they were perfectly fine with that. But when it came to black farmers, they were not perfectly fine with that. They did not want to have equal distribution of those resources. And so, black farmers had to sue them. And so when we start talking about black boys, a lot of those resources that were cultivated up from the ground level, when it came time to pass it and pass legislation for it, a lot of the pushback was coming from Republican white males, and now you have white women within those ranks who run things like Moms for Liberty that are throwing people off of the school board so that you can't have resources in those in the academy at the K through 12 level. So how can we say, in my experience, that it's black feminists, but in reality, I'm seeing white women all over the place and white men all over the place from a particular party, whether it's Republican or Libertarian, pushing back against this and making sure that black males don't get any of these resources. And we're starting to see it now with the EEOC and the defunding of the EEOC. We saw that coming from the Republicans, basically gutting out the resources so that you can't actually take these issues to court. You can't have your case heard. And you can't have these sort of resources available after you win these cases. And so I'm not seeing any black feminists. I've been in the social justice movement for the last 10 years. I don't see them doing any of these type of things. I know people within some of the Black Lives movements across the country, and it does not seem to be them at the fault. It seems to be a lot of white folks who have local seat levels as well as state level roles that are actually involved in this. And if you check with your state auditor, you'll probably see who's really involved in stymieing the progress of black boys when it comes to funding and resources.
What do you think of this statement right here? Pan-Afro is making here. Can you see it?
White men feed the black feminists with government entitlements, welfare state of the Democratic Party. I'm not sure what that really means.
Well, just start with the first part of it, that white men are feeding the black feminists with government entitlements.
I don't know how to respond to that other than I like to see proof of that.
Okay.
I think we overestimate the black feminists rather than understand that racism, white supremacy is has its tentacles in pretty much everything. We can't, understate that, that observation at all. I think that the black feminist has become the boogeyman within black male spaces as a way to, absolve white men of their, their interference.
Their
interference in progress.
I don't see it as a way to absolve white men. I see it as you're conspiring with the enemy. And
but hold on a second.
Making everything worse.
Let me perhaps make the final connection, or at least make it such that there's two doors that you can get out of, because we talked about this enemy and then still talking about community. And then we said, hey, it's about time you just look at them as two separate groups, because at some point you got to be like, hey, if they are doing things that are for their benefit, you can't be looking at them and keep either, expecting or scolding or whatever it is. It's like they're just playing the game the same way the Catholics and the Jews and the Irish are playing the game, and they're a different group from you. So either you go out the door of, oh, they're a different group, hence it doesn't matter what they're doing, and your main enemy will be white supremacy and its tentacles and its machinations or manifestations in different ways, right? And then maybe the black feminist is one of those manifestations, right? But there is no friend and enemy situation going on there, unless you want to turn back to the community again.
Ultimately, the enemy, of course, is white supremacy. So there's no argument there. That's absolutely what is doing all of this, is causing all of this. Some folks have been able to use support from the current system, the white supremacist system, to prop themselves up and to benefit more.
That's actually what black men have to do. Argument, if they're going to be Machiavellian and actually play in the system, or you don't. It would be my point of this whole thing.
Yeah, I get it. My argument is that as far as the relative benefit, it's been very beneficial to the black feminist. It's been very beneficial to black women, but been quite destructive to the black community and to black men and boys in particular. So that's where I draw the line. And I think that's where folks point at the black feminist and say, look, you're causing a lot of these problems. Your collaboration with the white supremacist structure, and even using talking points of the white supremacists to describe black men and boys. And that's where I sort of draw the line. Now, it may also be true that what Mike V is saying is true, that the pushback that he sees, not visible, the effective whatever pushback that he sees is mostly coming from white men. That may also be true. But I just wanted to provide that.
Well, it's not a matter of it's actually kind of blatant, right? I mean, we saw this with DeSantis, how blatant he's been at undermining the progress of black people, and more importantly, the impact on black men in his own state. And so I'm not sure. I don't do what they call punch left. I punch up. And so the punching up is punching at the system itself. I think when we look at black feminists in this space, I think the problem here is that we make them the scapegoat of everything, and then we don't focus on the system itself. And so if we're going to deconstruct, the system, we don't need to punch left. We can actually just punch up and make that the main focus. I think we don't put enough emphasis behind going after certain people. When we start talking about John Kennedy in Louisiana, when we start talking about Lindsey Graham, when we start talking about what was the guy who called Obama the food stamp president from Georgia. These sort of people have immense power within their ranks. And so to look at somebody like, Patrisse Cullors from BLM and say, well, I think that they're the problem. And I'm saying, well, why aren't we focusing on the folks who are out there out front attacking us in their local areas? I don't get it. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to go after somebody like Patrisse Cullors. You can replace Patrisse Cullors with Patricia Rose, and it'll be the same effect. It's not changing anything. You're not changing anything by going after BLM. You're not changing anything by going after what's her face from BLM from California. I forget her name now, but basically you can interchange all of these women, and it's not going to change anything. Going after the actual people who are responsible for this is really where I fight from.
You know what? I think the problem, I guess, that we as black men are really having is, you said you want to punch up. I think people have an issue with us punching in the direction of everybody punching at us. We're just supposed to punch at one person. Like if 10 people's hands are in a cookie jar, we should punch all 10 of the people.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that becomes an issue because, you could say, okay, it's white supremacy. That's fine. But there are a lot of people participating in white supremacy that is playing the I'm your friend game. So they need to get punched too.
Well, I feel, Elliot, I understand where you're coming from, but I think if you punch up, then you don't have to punch left.
No, because you're getting hit from the left.
Yeah, but those are light hits. Those are love taps compared to.
I don't get.
Those are love taps.
Oh, okay.
Those are love taps compared to what happened in Buffalo. Those are love taps compared to what happened in Charleston, South Carolina. Those are love taps compared to what happened in Kenosha, Wisconsin. See, we don't go after those folks. We only focus on what we think.
No, I'm not.
What we think may be doing it, right?
Saying.
Yeah.
No, I'm not. I'm saying, guess what? If you get a love, just because that's giving people a free pass to hit you. That's what that becomes a problem when you say, okay, I'm gonna focus on this person hitting me from right here, and I'm gonna ignore all these other people hitting me because it don't hurt as much. But I mean, if you're getting hit, you're getting hit. Everybody gotta there's a certain part where, and this would suck sometimes as being a black man in America, where people want to stab us in the back and want us to be altruistic. Like, yeah, I know I stabbed you in the back, but that was just a little knife. He hit you with the big one. Just let this little one go through. Like, no, you got to get that work too.
Well, I'm saying politically speaking. I'm not talking about a kinetic response. I'm saying politically speaking, right? For example, in this space, there was a woman in Rhode Island who did a headstand and did a 2-second twerk on TikTok, and that became the focus of black men, right? For discourse. Mm-hmm. But what they did not want to do was actually focus on the other areas that were really impacting them at the Supreme Court level or at the state level. They didn't care where black men were being disenfranchised. They didn't care that black men could not vote because they were being going through gerrymandering in their respective areas. They didn't care about that. They only cared about focusing on this one black woman because she was a part of the LGBTQ community and she was twerking on her head. That becomes the focus for black men. And I'm trying to get black men to stop focusing on these side issues that don't have any sort of immediate impact on you. Focus on punching up at the areas that do have the impact. And black men in this space don't want to do that. They want to focus on feminism and women. And I'm saying we don't necessarily have to do that.
I get what you're saying, but even when like DeSantis was brought up, he's Hispanic. Mm-hmm. So guess what?
No, he's not Hispanic. He's Italian. He's Italian.
Well, okay, he's Italian. Fine.
Yeah.
And they're like Cruz is Hispanic. So guess what? When they do stuff, that their community co-signs it. You get what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So when people when people who are in politics, when it's political, when their community does something that they know is going to adversely affect us, and they're cool with it, guess what? That means that whole community is cool with it. So politically speaking, you got to say, okay, they're not. It's not just, oh. A lot of times we play this game where it's a issue. Well, this is just one issue, but so we're cool together, but this one issue we're just different. No, it's a cumulative effect where all of these one issues add up to, no, I'm trying to get over on you. So we don't take like, the thing is, people don't want us to be offended by offending us. And that becomes black men become the big Negro in America, because we shouldn't just politically, physically, whatever you want to call it, we shouldn't just stump out everybody who's playing us for an enemy. And that becomes, let's not do that. Now, I can do it to you, but you can't do it to me. So everybody got to get that smoke. Yeah, the feminists do. Yes, the politicians do. The bankers do. Everybody, because they're all participating in the same thing, which is, forget the white supremacy part. They're hating us for pay.
I understand what you're saying, but I also think that we can only be effective at fighting everybody if we have proper literacy going into it. And what I see in this space, we don't have enough people who actually understand what's actually going on. That think that they fight, weaker people, such as, the woman twerking on her head, because that's easy for them. That's easy for black men to fight. That's an easy battle. That's an easy battle to go after, members of BLM. Go ahead.
That's not it. I get what you're saying, but that's not it. What it is when you say fighting people, we have a problem where when you see people pick somebody to fight, if I want to fight feminism and that's my fight, and you want to fight, a political party and that's your fight, don't jump in the middle of my fight. Go fight your fight. That's what keeps happening. It's like, you need to be over here. No. I'm fighting this. You fight that. You can't say, kind of in instance, it's a multi-pronged thing. We have to come at it from different angles and get in and stop doing your thing and go tell somebody to stop doing their thing. So now you're trying to you create two losses when you could have had two opportunities to win.
So
I don't know how much you heard of that, Mike V. Because your connection dropped. Are you back on now? No.
Okay.
All right.
So we're approaching that time anyways, okay?
Yes.
And Kaizo, are you still there?
Okay, now wait a minute. Now LAR dropped.
Yep, I'm here.
Okay. So let's take it back a couple of steps here, because again, for me, I see, from a point of view of pragmatism, which again, this conversation, I believe, is couched on. That's where I'm trying to push it towards, as I mentioned from the beginning, realpolitik, pragmatic approaches to perhaps idealistic goals, right? And pragmatically speaking, what kinds of coalitions do you form, and what kinds of groups, blah, 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 and all these kinds of things have been mentioned. So in pragmatic terms, you don't gain anything by looking at an enemy, a supposed enemy or supposed separate group, and in other words, nothing's going to happen from there, right? from that interaction. You may point out, just in terms of the pragmat, because it's about what you're going to do, not about pointing to other groups propping themselves up, because that's what they should be doing. Okay, they should be propping themselves up. They should be in the Machiavellian fashion, working within the system, getting what they can. 100% is what they should be doing. Okay, now what you should be doing from a pragmatic point of view, I think, completely negates the side argument of whether it's the feminist or that, because there's a practical step that you take regardless, right? So on the practical step front, speaking from the individual point of view now, which is kind of where we started from, okay, the individual you mentioned, you said Jay-Z or something like that, who can be sufficiently Machiavellian, who can actually go after their own power and such, or how do they break out of this particular juncture here where it's like, oh, these people are against me. Let's call it the politics of resentment, which is, shout out to Friedrich Nietzsche, right? The politics of the resentment or slave morality idealism, right? You're looking at things as from the point of view of, oh, it's not fair, or if this person was in my group, they would have been treated worse. It's like, well, that sucks for you, but your group should be better then, right? There is no like because that's the law of the junk, that's the law of the world, right? That kind of thing. So from an individual point of view, should you how do you become more Machiavellian? Because you said from a group point of view, black men cannot be in that position. I'm assuming you're saying because of the certain kind of a power vacuum. But how about the individual that is trying to be that person who has to spearhead, whether it be in the tech space or whatever it may be that they're trying to do, that's going to be a beneficiary of these programs that Mike V is advocating for? The individual becoming more Machiavellian and looking away
Right.
from things that are not pragmatic. What do you have to say about that? And then we'll go around with final thoughts and whatnot.
Yeah, so yeah, great question. Actually, what Mike V was talking about, all those programs are real. However, one thing that I would like to add here, where let's say feminism or other sort of black feminism can actually come against us, which again I'll show how you escape it, is when you have these tech money being sponsored, women, black women specifically, usually take that money, spend it on bringing in a speaker to come and speak to them about how bad it is being black and woman in tech. So that money doesn't usually actually get spent, most of it, on the actual tech, let's say knowledge, or bringing in actual experts to do like some kind of classes. No, that money is divided. So if you are going to form coalitions, there's nothing wrong forming coalitions with black women, but there is that element of, okay, you are going to be meeting people who, in your case, you'll be called enemies as the individual who don't want to actually build the skills, but want to talk about how hard building the skills are. Again, this is after you already discussed within the groups that it is hard to build the skills. So how do you escape that situation? I think ultimately, you kind of have to have some kind of elitist notion. For example, LAR is a successful enough black man, but he obviously puts his heart out to the other blacks, right? But he's successful. He's not Dusty. So in this essence, right, if you're going to play that Machiavellian game, I think you just have to acknowledge your superiority to the other ones, and then build like-minded relationships with people that are gonna move you forward. That's what Jay-Z did. He removed himself from the Dusties and started building relationships and move forward. Right? Didn't he have that issue with Def Jam and the other guy over there crying and saying it's not fair? But he maintained work ethic and moved forward.
Okay, well put there. Don't be a Dame Dash talking about culture vultures and what you were owed and who was not real to you and all that female crap. And nobody gives a crap about your feelings and who hurt you, in a deal, bro. Yeah, so be a Jay-Z. Do what you got to do. No one needs to hear about all the times you got stabbed, or maybe you stabbed somebody in the back, right? Because all that stuff, especially within the realm of legalities, it doesn't necessarily have to mean that you were immoral because you did something that some people call unethical in business. Okay, but that's a I'm getting into a side alley there, but well put. Seems like Mike V is not there, so I'm going to go to you, LAR, right? With regards to your final thoughts here, okay, and if he comes back, I guess we'll go to Mike V before Dr. Thunder. With regards to your final thoughts, and we started this thing about, we started from the individual, we went to the group, and we know that now we're coming back to the individual, but don't give me the LAR special, okay? The LAR special is always reporting about how people are. It's like, well, in America, people do this. Well, in America, people just want to have this group over that group. Well, people are lazy, so they're going to do this. Like, okay, cool. As an individual, okay, how do you break free from some kind of immobility that is causing these people? Because if the data that Mike V presents is true regarding, hey, black boys are not performing well in STEM because they don't see these types of people. There's certain types of challenges above and beyond. How do you lift yourself out of that? Okay, how do you be a bootstrap, bro? Lift yourself out of that situation and move forward, regardless of the fact that you don't have this coalition, this group, this political power built yet. But you're gonna go out anyways. Go ahead, there. Give us your little pep talk and closing thoughts.
In America, as an individual, no. As the only thing I can think of off the top of my head is you're gonna have to do a lot of different things, because what's gonna wind up happening is you might hit the first time, you might hit the 35th time, but as far as trying to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and make yourself successful, you know, it I would say for black men, it's kind of like people starting a business. You're going to fail more than you hit. So, and you probably won't have as many mentors or opportunities, and your mistakes might harm you more than other people. So you might have to try a bunch of different things before you actually get to something that can actually get you where you want to be. So be open to actually just pivoting and doing something different. So that's what I would say. Be open to pivoting, because even though you might be great at something, the environment might not allow you to be compensated like a great person for it.
Good. So be ready to pivot. All right. Mike V, are you there? And if you are you there?
Yeah, he's still having an issue with I don't know, Ecam kicked him out and then some weird stuff.
It's
Which is like terrible timing for that, cuz he was really really adding a lot of quality to the stream today. Really great points he was making. Who's next? It looks like Kaizo's also.
no, yeah, no. Kaiser gave his final thoughts. LAR gave his final thoughts. It's on you, sir. On you. We are closing. Okay. And today, as I mentioned, let me just kind of give a general recap about what we talked about. I said, hey, look, politics is about group social dynamics, right? It's that simple. It's the high school cafeteria or high school, right? You have these groups. You got, the group has to give you status, generally speaking, right? And you can either be with the jocks over here or the bikers over there or the grease monkeys over here, and you guys have your way of being and you have your hierarchy in there. And these are the things that we see writ large in the political space. We see it in the case of Donald Trump. His group holds him up. Some other people are identified with other groups and they virtue signal to those groups, and those groups hold them up. So how do you form these kinds of groups as a black man, both as an individual and as a group? What are some of the impediments? I think that we went relatively far in coming up with certain lists, up to the point of talking about education and the coalition building within education. Okay. Then we came back to the individual, talking about how do you become sufficiently Machiavellian so that you know that what matters and what doesn't matter. Okay. Shout out to the serenity prayer. There's some things you're not going to change and it doesn't matter, and you got to do what you got to do. But Dr. Thunder, what are your final thoughts?
Yeah, great show today. And it is true, Trump, if you love him, hate him, whatever, he has a particular constituency. And the reason that he's able to do what he does, and the reason that his poll numbers went up even after he was found guilty, is because he has folks that are propping him up. He has a base. He has people that rock with him, and that just works. Griner, same thing. Brittney Griner. The reason that I think last night she resumed her professional football. Oh my goodness, professional basketball career in the WNBA, which, by the way, would not exist. Oh, okay, I don't have to go into that, but we know we have a certain talking point that we like to use about the WNBA, and 27 years it's existed though, right? And I wanted to say thank you very much for the very big super chat, the $50 super chat from Pan Afro, Black MGTOW, Patriarch. Thank you very much. Saying, salute open discourse from all perspectives. 100%. That's what we strive to do over here. Now, let me just continue on by saying, unless black men develop the same sort of mechanism, the same sort of people that rock with you, constituency, base, alliance, unless we do that, we're not going to have the same kind of pull, right? And so whatever the press is on us, whatever they say that we did that and worse, right? That will be the general assessment. But when we have more folks that rock with us, we have more people that can stand in the gap and say, well, but I know some brothers, and I actually caucus with this brother. And so I don't actually think that that's what the deal is. But even if I do think it, we are allied. So I don't care if that cat was grabbing women, whatever. It doesn't matter to me because we are together. And as he goes, I go. I need this cat. So I'm going to prop him up anyway. Right? So that's the kind of sort of structure that has to be developed. And Mike V said, black women have done that better than black men have. And that's 100%. I totally agree with that. Now, part of that is because women all women, they tend to have stronger social networks because they're more social than we are. But we can't allow that to, keep us in this sort of bottom position, as it were. We have to find ways to develop these networks. Now, I've said this over and over. I still believe that black men are the political X factor. If we can get these things together, if we can become less party loyal and more policy specific and become more knowledgeable about the political process, and then be willing to collaborate with folks that are aligned with our interests, and quit believing that we are solely responsible for the rise or fall of the black community. We have been excommunicated from the black community. So why is it that it's our responsibility for it to go in a particular direction? So once we can get that weight off our back and then start actually going after things that are going to benefit us in making arrangements, making deals with folks, actually requiring people to give us something for our vote. If we do that, then really only who we want to win these elections can actually win.
Mic drop. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's Eastern. Every Sunday, case closed. Highest level conversations on the most relevant topic in this space. Yes, indeed. And don't forget to come like the stream before you leave, okay?
Yeah,
Before you leave,
share,
it as
comment,
well.
subscribe, become a channel member where you'll get access to all archive videos, support black male media, support independent media. Super chats enabled. Super thanks for the replay gang. Cash App, Venmo, PayPal, Dr. Thunder Music, all one word. Spell out the word doctor. And if you want to buy me a sandwich, send me a Cash App. You can donate to the sandwich fund. You can become a sandwich gang member. Dr. Thunder Music.
Pastrami on rye. That's a good
Yes.
one, right? Pastrami on rye, some good pickles, just nice and steamy.
And check it out. Make sure you tune in next week, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, on Sunday, this coming Sunday, on Ike's channel for another riveting episode of Case Closed. Also, make sure you come back on Wednesday to this channel for Getting Ish Done with Ike and Dr. Thunder. That'll be 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Make sure you sub to all of the folks that were on the panel. Kaiserian Empire Live. Make sure you get over to LAR Movement's channel. Thank you very much to Mike V for coming to the show. Make sure you go over to Ike and sub to Ike's channel. Also become a member on Ike's channel. become a member on ICE Channel. And that is our time. Thank you very much for being here, and make it a great day, make it a great week, and be good to yourself and others. That's our time. Peace.